Well, I came on the scene. I sort of was the next generation that Jay Chatterjee has discussed with you. My first ACSP conference, my first year as an academic, was a position I had at Florida State University as a young assistant professor, was at the Washington, D.C. conference at Howard University. And so I knew that it was the first, quote unquote, academic ACSP conference. Since this was, so my timing was excellent. I didn't have to work like Jay and other people had to do to create a conference. I just could sort of fall right into it. Sort of a typical baby boomer syndrome. You know, all these things that were created by the previous generation, we just fell right into. So as I recall, I didn't give a paper. I don't think I gave. I gave a paper the second year. First year I was just a new academic and I was feeling my way through it. The thing that impressed me the most was the perspective, because as Jay mentioned, I didn't realize it was a former Howard Johnson's, but the Howard University Hotel didn't. I guess this is part of it. It was pretty small, and the expectation was the conference would be small. Well, as it turned out, it was bigger than people expected. And one of the sessions I remember attending was around the swimming pool. They had a nice indoor swimming pool, and we had there was a panel session. In fact, one of my colleagues from the University of Michigan, doctoral student from Michigan, gave a paper there. And I just thought, well, this is sort of interesting. And so watching the conference evolve, both in terms of growing attendance, but also in terms of the quality of the hotels. The first 3 years, Howard, Chicago, and then San Francisco, the hotels were not the best. They were not the Allerton was one of these fine old hotels that was sort of waiting for renovation. And the same was true in San Francisco. I thought it was called the San Franciscan Hotel, but I can't remember. And then in New York City in 1984, of course, New York City is very expensive. Tiniest rooms I'd ever seen. Being from the Midwest, I wasn't quite accustomed to this. I shared a room, in fact, with Bruce Stiftel, who was a first-year faculty member at that time. So my earliest memories were of an organization that was progressing. There were opportunities for young academics. There clearly were people who were veterans already, who were, you looked up to and you followed their lead. But there was plenty of room for young academics, such as myself, to begin to participate in the organization. So by my second year, I was giving a paper. And in fact, by my second or third year, I was elected to the governing board or the executive board, which was sort of amazing considering I was still an assistant professor and I should have been doing research instead. But it was really exciting to be part of an organization that was forming the journal. I remember getting my first copy of the Journal of Planning, Education, and Research, and actually two of my colleagues at Florida State had articles in that, so I was excited for them and excited about that. And I was just pleased to be part of this organization that was just getting started. Ed McClure, who was president at that time, I believe, had been a faculty member at Florida State. He had since subsequently moved to the University of Texas and then actually passed away not that long after. So there was a lot of connection between where I was at Florida State and the Association of Collegiate Schools of Planning. I really remember, I think that the Atlanta conference to me in some way was sort of, and I think as Jay indicated, was sort of a breakthrough event. It was at a first-class hotel in Atlanta, and it had a much greater attendance, close to 1,000, something like that. And there was just a vitality about it. David Sawicki, who was then at Georgia Tech, still retired at Georgia Tech, really put a lot of effort into making that an outstanding conference. The other thing I remember that one of the big issues that planning schools had at that time was declining enrollments in the early 1980s. They'd enjoyed a boom period in the 1970s with environmental legislation. But things were not looking so good early 1980s. In fact, I remember one of the events I remember at the Chicago conference in 1982 was this plea by Don Miller, who was head of the University of Washington's planning program. And he had, the University of Washington planning program was threatened with with being basically done away with. And he made a plea to his other planning school directors to help support them. And then this began, I believe certainly played an important role in developing a tradition where schools are threatened with extinction, that the profession rallies around against them, rallies around them, rally with them, and in a supportive way. And I've seen this happen over and over again. One of the things about planning schools is that they're typically small. Even the biggest ones are small compared to a physics department or an economics department. And a lot of universities don't have planning programs. And so they are therefore vulnerable to possible extinction when budget cuts take place. As I got more involved, Bruce Stiftel and I became editors, became the third editors. The journal moved to the University of Illinois after Jay and David, and then the opportunity came up to apply to be editors. And Bruce Stiftel decided we were going to put together an application. We interviewed at the University of Texas. I think there were two competitors. I guess I should name who they were, but they were schools that had really pretty strong reputations, and we got it. And so that was an exciting opportunity. Editing a journal like JPR puts you. It's like I liken to being at a permanent conference. Instead of having a 3-day event where you listen to papers and enjoy papers and interact and stuff like that, we got to do it year round. And it really felt like we were at the center of what was going on. And I think we made, milestones. One of the big milestones that we made was getting the journal indexed. One of the concerns was it was not indexed, and therefore it wouldn't count towards citation counts, which were becoming more and more important. The bibliometrics, as we call it now, were just becoming into vogue in the early 1990s. So Bruce in particular made certain that we got accepted as an indexed journal. We took it, I think, from three publications per year to 4 per year, and it's still a quarterly. So we felt like making it a quarterly was really very, very important. I was on a bunch of committees. I chaired some committees. One of the committees that I chaired was an awards committee, and this was in the late 90s, early 2000s, I believe. And we thought that there should be more recognition of academics for what they do, and particularly what they do for the association. And so guess what? We came up with an award called the J. Chatterjee Award. And it had actually, there had been a service award that ACSP had presented to J. Chatterjee for his service, and obviously, from what you've heard already, well deserved. And it made great sense that not only should he be the first awardee, but the award should be named for him. And so now, and I chaired that committee for a number of years, maybe 10 years or something like that. And so had the privilege to review a lot of the people that were sort of the big names when I first came up, got an opportunity to recognize them. And I helped organize a mentoring committee, feeling like there needs to be a better connection between senior faculty and junior faculty in terms of mentoring them, helping them understand what is needed in order to get promoted and tenured. And then I got the opportunity, thanks to Cheryl Contant, who was president of ACSP, nominated me to be vice president and then president of ACSP. So I was vice president from 2009 to 2011, and then president from 2011 to 2013. My big issue was diversity, or the lack thereof, in the profession. It's still, even today, I was at a business meeting day before yesterday, and I was just looking at, it was a buffet, and so we were all lined up, and a lot of people had beat me to the line, so I could just sort of assess who was there. And it was mostly white guys. These are chairmen of planning departments, mostly white males. We certainly come a long way in terms of gender diversity. but it still that tends to be sort of pretty much male dominated, as we know is true in general in academics. So that remains a challenge. The other, another big challenge is diversity, racial diversity, ethnic diversity as well, and both at the student level as well as the faculty level. And there are still relatively few African American, Latino, Asian American faculty at our planning schools. And the question is how to do more about it. I had been impressed ever since I came to the University of Iowa in 2008 with programs that work with students while they were undergraduates to think about graduate school and to think about going into academia. And an opportunity came up, and so as a result, one of my agenda items was the greater diversity. And this had been talked about for a long time. What I was saying was nothing new, but I wanted for us to do something. It seemed like it was really, there was a lot of inertia. It was really difficult to know exactly what to do. We talked about the pipeline, the lack of graduate students. Fortunately, Marlon Bornett at University of Southern California said, let's do a pre-doctoral program for students of color. And I said, this is exactly what I was looking for. Being a baby boomer again, when somebody else proposes a good idea that I liked, then I said, yeah, I go for it. And so we supported that. ACSP contributed money to it, and it was very successful in the summer of 2013. So when I stepped down as president, fall of 2013, to me, it was really the biggest accomplishment, and it was obviously a group accomplishment that took place during my tenure as president, the one that I remain most proud of. And the workshop takes place every year and every other year now, and it continued to take place. So that is pretty firmly in place, and I'm very, very proud of that. And I hope it's producing results. I don't know if there's been any examination of how many of the students that go through that program actually enter and get PhDs in urban and regional planning. I really would like to know. Another thing that for many, many years we've had one book award in ACSP, and as I mentioned earlier, recognition of faculty is important. And both June Thomas, who was vice president when I was president, and I said, we really need another award. The existing award committee, the Paul Davidoff Award Committee said, we have so many good books, we can only make one or two awards. Why don't you come up with another award? So they weren't offended by us coming up with another award. June hit on the idea of developing the John Friedman Award. I'm going to have to clear my throat. Excuse me. Sometimes.
That's the great thing about post-video editing.
Yeah, I know, yeah, exactly. So I think June suggested John Friedman, eminent scholar in planning. John agreed, suggested we base it on sustainability, which I thought was really, really a good idea. So, and I think that award is being presented at this conference. I do not know who the award winner. I heard it yesterday, and I don't remember. Pardon?
Sonia Hurt.
Oh yes, Sonia Hurt. Exactly. Great. She does great research. So I'm very proud of the addition of that award, which means we give an book award every conference, not instead of every other year. And I think that does a great job of recognizing. One of the other issues that I was involved with in sort of in a rebellious way, is with PAB. Great idea. Planning Accreditation Board is a great idea. I've always felt like ACSP should have a right to not only just make suggestions, but influence PAB. And in particular, when there were a new set of rules that came along, proposed rules, when I first became president of PAB. And I was particularly concerned about two issues. One was related to diversity. And I thought that PAB was backing away from a commitment to diversity. They've been under the gun for a long time from various Supreme Court decisions with regard to affirmative action. And they've been very hesitant about that. And I thought, and others thought, they were being too hesitant. And secondly, there's also this professional sort of rivalry between who controls what planning education should be. Should it be the academics or should it be the practicing planners? And I thought there were some rules in there that would privilege the AICP exam, American Institute of Certified Planners, as being the certification for planners. And there are a lot of planning schools that train and educate planning students to work in a variety of careers and never join AICP. And I think we should be given the right to accomplish that. So in the short run, I think we won that battle in 2012 at a conference in, I think, LA, in terms of sort of getting more diverse language into PAB, and secondly, seeing that while AICP passage of the exam is important, it's not as so critical to the determination of whether a planning school is effective. In some ways, I was overly I sound like Donald Trump. We were overly successful because PAB then said that we really shouldn't have ACSP telling PAB what to do. And then that was because of their accrediting body saying you can't be an independent accreditor if your organizations are sort of telling you what to do or having the right, the veto power, basically. So that was in some ways a last hurrah. But I still believe in the last go-round, when there were new rules proposed, I, along with a number of other planning schools director, really questioned PAB's language again on inclusivity or the lack thereof. We thought they were being too timid. They were backing away too much from a strong approach to diversity. And so the result was that they basically said, we're not going to, we're going to hold off on these new rules until we get some more legal information. And I haven't seen the new rules yet. They've just come out. So I'm hoping that they're better than they were. But I think that continual sort of tension between, on the one hand, accreditation, and the other hand, academics and universities feeling like they have the right and the responsibility and the authority to determine how they're going to educate their students.
So I'm running just a tad bit behind, so I'm going to ask you to quickly talk about where you see the future of the organization.
What's happening right now with ACSP, which I think is really good, is one is brand. Well, it's branding, it's marketing, new logo, and on the one hand, it seems sort of superficial, but on the other hand, planning schools, as I've indicated earlier, suffer from a lack of visibility. They suffer from a lack of coordination. Lois Takahashi, the current president, has one foot in public health, and they have done a really, really good job in their public health organization, academic organization, of providing greater visibility for all schools of public health. And she is attempting to do the same thing here. So the ACSP invested quite a bit of money in working with a marketing firm to not only develop the logo, but begin to develop a greater visibility for planning in general. Planning suffers from a lack of visibility. That makes it difficult for us to recruit students. It makes it difficult for us to have a presence when we talk about very important issues. And so I think that's the future of the organization. And this has been controversial in the past. This is a learned society. Shouldn't we just be about journals and reading papers and stuff like that? Well, yes, but if our profession is going to suffer because we're not, it's thinking in an expansive way, then everything will suffer.
And if you're not promoting your brand in a way, because you have a brand regardless of whether you have a logo or not, if you're not actively promoting that and seeking input and membership, it will fizzle out.
Yes, exactly, right. Organizations do die, they do atrophy. Jay told the story of the birth of the organization, but just because you have 50 or plus years under your belt doesn't mean things are going to continue to thrive unless there are, other people in the organization, leadership in the organization, to help it to continue to not just survive, but to grow.
Right. Actively engaging and focusing on that brand. Yeah. Good. All right.
Thank you.
You guys were great.